Billie Holiday wasn't paranoid. She really was being followed. But it wasn't just FBI agents tracking her every move. In the summer of 1956, Lady Day confessed to her psychiatrist, "My husband knows my every move, hears every phone conversation, knows about every meeting. It's like he's living inside my head." Louis McKay's strange control over Billie's life at first seemed like nothing more than jealousy. Then her friends started to notice. Louis always knowing where they'd be before Billie did, showing up on unexpected trips, knowing Billie's deepest secrets. Tallulah Bankhead wrote Billie a letter in 1957. "Darling, that man is going to kill you and nobody will believe it because you're already dying slowly." Was Tallulah right? Was Louis McKay systematically destroying Billie Holiday? Or was this just an addict's paranoia? If you enjoyed this story and don't want to miss the untold stories of Billie Holiday, please don't forget to subscribe. Now let's discover how Louis McKay entered Billie Holiday's life and how he systematically destroyed a jazz legend. Louis McKay first met Billie Holiday in the late 1940s, but the story started much earlier than most people realize. Actually, Louis was Billie's childhood neighborhood friend from Baltimore, and he remembered her from the days when she was known as young Eleanora Fagan. Years later, when Billie became famous, Louis reappeared, this time as a strong, protective man, promising stability in Lady Day's chaotic world. By 1948, Billie's life was already in pieces. Divorced from her first husband Jimmy Monroe, her heroin addiction spiraling out of control, and the FBI tracking her day and night. Louis McKay arrived at exactly that moment, with his strong arms and memories of the old days. At first glance, Louis seemed like the perfect savior, handsome, charismatic, and constantly reminding her he was someone Billie could trust. Memory Midget, one of Billie's closest friends, remembered Louis's initial arrival this way. "Back then, any stability was like a miracle for Billie. When Louis came, he reminded Billie of her childhood, the Baltimore streets, the days before everything fell apart. Billie wanted to believe in him, but Louis's real intentions were different from the start. From 1948 to 1950, Louis gradually began infiltrating Billie's life, first as a friend, then as an advisor, and finally as an indispensable presence. Louis McKay's past was filled with dark secrets. According to official records, he was a small-time businessman, but in reality, he was known in Detroit's underworld. Gambling, smuggling, and shady business dealings were Louis's real sources of income. In FBI files, Louis McKay's name appeared long before Billie. Illegal alcohol smuggling charges in 1945, casino operation accusations in 1947. But Louis never went to prison. Somehow the cases always got dropped. Years later, it would emerge that Louis was already cooperating with federal agents during that period, providing information about Detroit's dark world. When he met Billie Holiday, Louis McKay wasn't just an old neighborhood friend, he was a potential information source and an inside man. In 1950, Louis and Billie officially married, but this marriage was built on unhealthy foundations from the very beginning. At that time, Billie couldn't even perform at Carnegie Hall because her cabaret card had been revoked due to her 1947 drug conviction. Singing in New York clubs was forbidden. Her income had dropped, her debts had increased, and her heroin need was taking more control each passing day. Louis saw this situation as an opportunity. He met with Billie's managers and business partners one by one and positioned himself as Lady Day's new manager. The problem was, Louis knew absolutely nothing about the music industry. The only thing he understood was control. The first years of their marriage seemed normal on the surface. Louis took Billie on tour, organized her concerts, and played his role as her manager. But friends were starting to notice strange things. Billie's old friend Maylie Duffy described it this way. Louis was always by Billie's side, literally always. If Billie went to the dressing room, Louis waited at the door. If she made a phone call, Louis stood nearby. If she talked with a friend, Louis intervened. At first we thought he was a protective husband. Then we understood this wasn't protection, it was prison guard duty. Louis' control was gradually increasing, and by the time Billie realized it, it was too late to escape. By 1951, Louis McKay's control over Billie was becoming obvious to everyone. His first target was Billie's social circle. The musicians she'd worked with for years were removed one by one. Louis called them bad influences, but the real reason was different. These people knew Billie before Louis, and could see her transformation. Pianist Bobby Tucker, Billie's friend of 10 years, was suddenly fired in 1952. Bobby remembered it this way. One day, Billie called me backstage. Her eyes were teary. "Bobby, Louis doesn't want me working with you," she said. I asked why. She couldn't answer. Then Louis came in and told me, "We don't need you anymore." Billie couldn't say anything. She just looked at the floor. Financial control started much more insidiously. Louis gradually took over all of Billie's financial affairs. First, he started collecting concert money as her manager. Then he gained access to Billie's bank accounts. By 1953, only Louis McKay knew where Billie Holiday's earnings were going. Billie's accountant described it this way: Louis wanted every payment in cash. He wouldn't accept checks, didn't want bank transfers, cash. Then nobody could know what happened to that money. "I wanted to present Billie with an income expense report." Louis said, "No need, I'll handle it." After a while, Billie called me saying, "Louis says we don't need you." But the darkest aspect was Louis starting to use Billie's addiction as a weapon. Heroin supply came completely under Louis's control. When Billie tried to contact independent suppliers, Louis threatened them and drove them away. Now Billie's access to drugs was completely dependent on Louis. This was a horrifying control mechanism. If Billie obeyed, heroin would come. If she resisted, withdrawal would begin. According to Memory Midget's testimony, one day Billie fought with Louis, told him no about something. That night Louis didn't bring home any heroin. The next morning, Billie was shaking, sweating, begging. Louis looked at her and said, "Maybe next time you'll listen to me." From that moment on, Billie couldn't stand up to Louis. In 1954, Billie went on a European tour, and this was a chance to briefly escape Louis's control. The Paris concerts were magnificent. European fans didn't just worship Lady Day, they respected her. For the first time in years, Billie felt free. Louis had stayed in America, and Billie was whispering to friends, "Maybe this time I can really get divorced." But Louis's arms were long. The money earned from the tour was sent directly to Louis, and Billie was nearly penniless in Paris. One day while waiting in her hotel room, there was a knock at the door. Louis McKay had come to Paris. Billie would later tell her friend Annie Ross, "When I opened that door, what I saw wasn't a husband, it was my prison. As long as Louis was there, I could never be free." But Louis controlled Billie, not just through physical presence, but through psychological games. He constantly engaged in relationships with other women, and didn't even bother hiding it from Billie. He'd talk on the phone with other women while Billie was right there. He'd bring his mistresses backstage. He was systematically destroying Billie's self-confidence. "You're getting old. Your voice isn't what it used to be. There are younger and prettier women without you." These words ate at Billie's soul. On one hand, he was cheating on her. On the other hand, saying, "Only I love you, only I accept you." It was a classic manipulation cycle, and it was working. But nobody knew the real bombshell. Louis McKay wasn't just Billie Holiday's husband. He was also a registered FBI informant. In the minutes of an FBI meeting held in 1955, this sentence appeared: "Our most reliable source of information about Billie Holiday is her husband, Louis McKay. He provides detailed reports about the subject and agrees to continue cooperation." This document would only come to light when it was declassified in the 1990s. For years nobody knew. Louis McKay was selling Billie to the FBI. Every phone conversation, every meeting, every amount of heroin purchased, every friend visit, all of it went into FBI reports through Louis' mouth. Billie's "my husband knows everything" paranoia actually wasn't paranoia at all. Louis really did know everything, and he was reporting it all to federal agents. How exactly did Louis' relationship with the FBI begin? According to official documents, in 1950, the year he married Billie, Louis McKay came onto the FBI's radar due to illegal activities in Detroit. But Louis made a smart bargain. "Billie Holiday tells me everything. I can give you information." For the FBI, this was a golden opportunity. For years they'd been trying to convict Billie Holiday for heroin addiction, but could never find enough evidence. Now they had someone on the inside, and this person was legally Billie's husband, so he couldn't testify but could provide information. Louis McKay was the perfect spy for the FBI, and Billie Holiday had no idea. The information Louis provided to the FBI wasn't limited to just drug use. Billie's political views, her friends, especially her relationships with people known as communist or leftist, all of it was reported. The late 40s and early 50s were the McCarthy era. The communist hunt was at its peak. Billie Holiday was already classified as dangerous because of the song Strange Fruit. Strange Fruit was a protest describing black people lynched in southern states, and the FBI viewed this song as an attack on American values. Louis McKay didn't support Billie singing this song. In fact, at some concerts, he pressured her not to sing it. "This song is destroying you," he'd say. But the real reason was FBI pressure. In 1956, Billie Holiday started seeing a psychiatrist. She was showing symptoms of depression, anxiety, and paranoia. What she told psychiatrist Dr. Eric Byrne was this: "My husband constantly watches me. Wherever I go, he's there. Whoever I talk to, he knows. Whatever I do, he finds out. I don't know if it's in my head or if it's real anymore." In his notes from this period, Dr. Byrne wrote that Billie might be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. But Dr. Byrne was wrong. Billie really was being watched. Louis listened to phone conversations at home, secretly read her letters. In some cases, he even paid Billie's friends to gather information about her. Billie's expression, "living inside my head," wasn't an exaggeration. It was tragic reality. Thanks to the information Louis gave the FBI, Billie Holiday was under constant pressure. At every concert, police were ready and waiting. Every hotel room was searched. Wherever Billie went, the FBI was there, because Louis told them in advance where she'd be going. During a concert in Philadelphia in March 1956, police raided the dressing room. They found heroin and Billie was arrested. How did they know? Louis McKay had called the FBI the day before the concert and reported Billie has drugs on her. He'd turned in his own wife. Billie was hospitalized, underwent detox treatment, and Louis visited her every day. He brought flowers, whispered his love, and said, "I'm proud of you. You'll make it this time." Billie believed him. She would never learn who the betrayer was. The year 1957 became a complete nightmare for Billie Holiday. Louis' control was no longer just psychological. It had turned into physical violence. The first major incident happened in February at their New York home. Billie had asked where the $8,000 advance she'd received for a tour had gone. Louis had said, "I spent it on business." Billie insisted, "What business? Where are you spending my money?" The answer was a slap. Billie looked at Louis in shock. Louis said in a cold voice, "Don't ever question me again." That night Billie's face swelled up, but she had to perform the next day. The makeup artist worked for hours trying to cover the bruises. The violence incidents became increasingly frequent. Louis no longer hesitated to use physical force to discipline Billie. According to Billie's testimonies, Louis would slap her, push her, pull her hair, and sometimes throw her against the wall. But the worst part was the unpredictability of the violence. Sometimes a small thing, a wrong look, a wrong tone, a wrong word, was enough to anger Louis. Billie was constantly on alert, constantly trying to be careful. But in these types of relationships, there are no rules. The abuser always finds new excuses. Billie told friends, "When Louis hits me, afterward he cries and apologizes. He says it won't happen again. He says, 'I'm so sorry,' and I believe him because I want to believe, but it happens again every time." The financial exploitation had also reached its peak. In 1957, Billie's annual income was approximately $110,000, a huge amount for that time. But Billie had no money in her bank account. Louis controlled all income and only gave Billie an allowance. Billie had to ask Louis for permission to buy a pair of shoes. She couldn't pay her own phone bill with her own earned money. She asked friends to borrow money, dying of shame. Tallulah Bankhead gave Billie $500 one day. Billie said, crying, "This is the first time I have money in my own pocket. Louis doesn't know." But Louis eventually found out and took that money too. He told Billie, "I'm your husband. Your money is my money." In reality, Louis was spending that money at gambling tables, on his mistresses, and in questionable investments. What happened on the night of June 6, 1957, was never forgotten. That evening at the concert, Billie had seen Louis flirting with another woman. When they got home, Billie started yelling, "You can't do this to me. I'm your wife." Louis said coldly, "Shut up." Billie continued. Louis approached and pushed Billie against the wall. Billie fell. Her head hit the dresser. Blood started flowing. Louis left. Billie lay there for hours. Nobody came to help. In the morning, when neighbors heard her voice and knocked on the door, they found Billie unconscious. She was taken to the hospital. 6 stitches were put in. The doctor asked, "How did it happen?" Billie said, "I fell." The doctor didn't believe it, but couldn't force the issue. When Louis came to the hospital, he held Billie's hand and said, "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Billie forgave him again, because she had no other choice, but her friends could no longer stay silent. Tallulah Bankhead, Annie Ross, Carmen McRae, all of them were trying to convince Billie to escape from Louis. Tallulah told Billie, "This man is going to kill you." Billie answered, "I know, but what can I do? He controls everything. I have no money, no place to go." Tallulah offered her money, suggested she stay at her house. Billie wanted to accept, but was afraid. "Louis will find me. He always finds me. I can't escape from him." This fear wasn't baseless. Louis really did track Billie's every movement. Once Billie had gone to a friend's house without telling Louis. 2 hours later, Louis knocked on the door. When she asked, "How did you find me?" Louis smiled and said, "I always know." Tallulah Bankhead was one of Billie Holiday's oldest and most loyal friends. The bond between them wasn't just friendship. They'd had a romantic relationship in the past, and Tallulah still deeply cared about Billie. In the fall of 1957, Tallulah couldn't take it anymore and took action. She met with her lawyer. "What can we do to save Billie from that man?" The lawyer explained the situation. Billie was an adult woman. Unless she filed for divorce, there was nothing legally that could be done. Tallulah said if Billie files for divorce, Louis will kill her. If she doesn't file, he'll still kill her. It was a dead end. Tallulah tried anyway. In December 1957, she invited Billie to a private dinner, without Louis. Billie came but was constantly anxious, looking at her watch, saying, "I'm getting late, Louis will worry." Tallulah held her hand. "Billie, listen to me. Louis is killing you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually he'll kill you. Come with me. Tonight. Let me take you to my house. Let's file for divorce. Let's make a new start." Billie's eyes filled with tears. "I wish I could, Tallulah. I really wish I could. But I can't. Louis has everything. I have no money. I have my addiction. I have no strength left. And if I leave him, I don't know what he'll tell the FBI. They're already watching me." Tallulah froze. "What he'll tell the FBI? What does that mean, Billie?" Billie shook her head. "I don't know. Just a feeling. Louis always uses the FBI as a threat, like he has some connection with them." That night, Tallulah understood. The situation was much more complex than she'd thought. The next day, Tallulah wrote the famous letter. "Dear Billie, after talking with you last night, I couldn't sleep. I need to tell you something, and I have to do it in writing, because if I say it to your face, I won't be able to bear it. That man is going to kill you. Maybe physically, maybe spiritually, but the result is the same. And the worst part is this, while you're dying slowly, nobody will believe it, because you've already been dying slowly for years. Drugs, alcohol, depression, everyone will say Billie's in bad shape again, and won't see the real reason. Louis knows this, and that's why he's comfortable. Please, Billie, one last time I'm begging you, save yourself. My door is always open. With love, Tallulah." Billie received the letter and read it crying, but she did nothing. She couldn't, because Louis came home early that day and saw the letter in Billie's hand. "What's this?" he asked. Billie tried to hide the letter, but Louis snatched it away. After reading it, he tore up the paper. "Tallulah Bankhead is your enemy. She's trying to separate you from me, because she's jealous. You won't see her again." Billie tried to object. "She's my oldest friend." Louis's voice was ice cold. "I said you won't see her again. Do you understand?" Billie lowered her head. "I understand." From that day on, Tallulah's phone calls went unanswered. Her letters never reached Billie. Louis had separated Billie from even her closest ally. Annie Ross and Carmen McRae made their own intervention attempts too. At the beginning of 1958, the two of them took Billie out to lunch, with Louis's knowledge. Otherwise, Billie couldn't have come. When they sat down at the restaurant, Carmen got straight to the point. "Billie, we're all worried. Louis is treating you badly, and you're getting worse and worse. You need help." Billie lit a cigarette. Her hands were trembling. "I know, but what can I do?" Annie leaned forward. "Come with us, now. Let's leave the restaurant. We'll take you to a safe place. Then we'll meet with a lawyer." Billie shook her head. "Louis has all my money. If I divorce him, I'll be penniless. Plus, I'm an addict. Alone, She couldn't finish her sentence. She started crying. Carmen and Annie understood the terrible truth at that lunch. Billie had lost her ability to make decisions. Years of abuse, control, and addiction had made her completely dependent on Louis. Psychologically, she couldn't find the strength to separate from Louis. This was what's called a trauma bond. The victim becomes emotionally attached to the abuser because survival mechanisms require it. Billie hated Louis, but at the same time needed him, because Louis had convinced her she couldn't survive without him. Carmen remembered that day this way. "When we left the restaurant, Louis was waiting on the corner. How did he know we were there?"
He called Billie over, and the two of them walked away. Billie looked back once. There was a cry for help in her eyes, but she couldn't open her mouth. People in the music industry were also starting to notice. Record producer Norman Granz had been working with Billie for years and saw the situation up close. When Billie came to the studio in 1958 to record a new album, Louis was with her. Norman asked Louis to wait outside the studio. Artists prefer to be alone during recording. Louis refused. I'm Billie's manager and husband. I'm with her everywhere. Norman insisted. Tension increased. Finally, Billie intervened. Norman, please, let Louis stay. Otherwise, I can't be comfortable. That day, Norman understood. Billie couldn't work without Louis anymore. She'd been so conditioned. But 1958 wasn't just personal tragedy. The FBI thought it was time to put their plan into action. In November 1958, Billie Holiday was performing concerts in San Francisco. Her stage performance was still impressive, but backstage, Billie was collapsing. Heroin use was out of control. Her liver was damaged. Weight loss had intensified. Louis was still everywhere, still controlling, but it was too late now. Billie Holiday was entering the final stages of her life. FBI agents were watching the San Francisco concerts, based on information they got from Louis. They were sure Billie had drugs on her, but they didn't issue an arrest warrant. Why? Because there was a bigger plan. Wait for Billie's death and completely tarnish her name after she died. Louis McKay had also put his plan into action. At the end of 1958, he applied to court to become Billie's legal guardian. The justification: my wife is a drug addict, can't make her own decisions, is unable to manage her financial affairs. The court accepted the request. Now Louis wasn't just Billie's husband, but also her legal guardian. This meant taking away Billie's last piece of freedom. Now Billie couldn't conduct any legal transactions, couldn't sign any contracts, couldn't even decide whether to be hospitalized. Louis made all decisions. One of Billie's friends said, Louis legally reduced Billie to child status. A 43-year-old woman who'd sung at hundreds of concerts, influenced millions of people, but now had no say in her own life. At the beginning of 1959, Billie's health reached critical level. Liver cirrhosis was diagnosed. Doctors said she urgently needs treatment, otherwise she'll die within 6 months. But Louis postponed treatment, saying, we need to finish this tour first, then we'll deal with it. The tour started in March. Billie was staggering on stage. At one concert, she fainted at the microphone. The audience was in panic, but Louis calmed the panic. Lady Day is just a bit tired. She'll get better. But she didn't get better. She died a little more each day. In April, Billie was in a condition where she couldn't walk anymore. Louis took her on stage in a wheelchair. Viewers were crying, but Louis said the show must go on. In reality, Louis was squeezing out the last money. After Billie died, there would be no income. In May 1959, Billie's body completely surrendered. Louis finally agreed to hospitalization, but the hospital he chose was the cheapest. Billie was admitted to Metropolitan Hospital's general ward. There wasn't even a private room. The diagnosis was confirmed: liver cirrhosis, kidney failure, heart complications. Doctors said we're too late. Billie was approaching a coma state. Louis came to the hospital every day, but visits were short. He was busy because he was preparing Billie's will, for himself. He was meeting with lawyers, preparing documents for all of Billie's assets to go to him. While Billie was in a coma, Louis was dividing up her inheritance. On May 31, 1959, something happened. Heroin was found in the hospital room. Who had put it there? Billie was in a condition where she couldn't move. Visitors were limited, but heroin was found under her bed, and police were immediately called. The FBI stepped in, and Billie Holiday was arrested on her deathbed. She was handcuffed to the bed, symbolically because she couldn't move anyway. But the message was clear. Billie Holiday is a criminal. Even while dying, she's a criminal. Police started keeping watch 24 hours. Friends' visits were banned. Only Louis could enter. Who had put that heroin there? Years later, some witnesses would voice their suspicions. Louis, because he wanted to control everything about Billie's death, even the moment of death itself. June and July were a horrible wait. While Billie lay in the hospital, her body was slowly shutting down. Sometimes she was conscious, sometimes in a coma. One day Billie whispered to a nurse, "Louis killed me, didn't he?" The nurse didn't know what to say. "No ma'am, you're just feeling bad." Billie shook her head. "No, Louis has been killing me for years. Now it's just the last breath." On the morning of July 17, 1959, at 3:10, Billie Holiday took her last breath. Nobody was with her. Louis wasn't at the hospital. He'd gone home to sleep. Only police were on duty. Billie Holiday died like this, alone, handcuffed, declared a criminal. A few hours after Billie Holiday died, Louis McKay came to the hospital. He cried, said, "I lost my wife," told reporters, "I loved her so much." The funeral was magnificent. Thousands of fans came, famous musicians performed. Louis sat in the front row, cried, accepted condolences. But when the funeral ended, Louis met with his lawyer. Is the will ready? Everything goes to me, right? The lawyer confirmed. All of Billie's rights, future album revenues, copyrights, everything went to Louis McKay. Because when Billie died, he was officially her guardian and spouse. But there was a problem. Billie had no money. A woman who'd earned for years, generated millions of dollars in income, was penniless when she died. Bank accounts had a total of $750.70. Louis said Billie couldn't earn any money in recent years. Medical expenses destroyed us. But the truth was different. Louis had been stealing Billie's money for years. Now only he knew where the money was. Years later, it would emerge. Louis had secret accounts in 3 different banks, totaling $127,000. But nobody could prove this at the time. Billie's family and friends tried to sue Louis. They said that man exploited Billie, killed her, but legally there was no proof. Because Louis was Billie's legal husband and guardian, he had every right. Court cases were dismissed. Louis' FBI informant status hadn't been revealed yet. These documents would remain secret until the 1990s. Tallulah Bankhead said until she died, Louis killed that woman. But nobody listened. Everyone said Billie died because of drugs. The real killing mechanism wasn't seen. Systematic abuse, financial exploitation, psychological torture, and FBI collaboration. Louis McKay lived a relatively comfortable life after Billie's death. He lived off album revenues, gave interviews, was known as Billie's husband. He even worked as a consultant on the 1972 film Lady Sings the Blues, starring Diana Ross. He marketed himself as the man who knew Billie best. In the film, Louis was portrayed as a positive character, the supportive husband. The real story wasn't told. Louis died in 1981, at age 65. Billie had died at 44. Louis had outlived her by 21 years. When FBI documents were declassified in the 1990s, the shocking truth emerged. Louis McKay had been an FBI informant for years. He was watching Billie, reporting on her. He was a man who sold out his own wife. Historian Farah Jasmine Griffin examined the documents and wrote, Louis McKay wasn't just an abusive husband, he was a state-sponsored surveillance tool. The FBI wanted to destroy Billie Holiday, and Louis was their most effective weapon. But by then it was too late. Louis was dead. Billie was dead. Justice was never served. Today Billie Holiday is remembered as one of jazz music's greatest names. Strange Fruit is still one of the most powerful protest songs, but the Louis McKay part of the story is often skipped over. People say Billie was a drug addict. They say she destroyed herself, but the truth is much darker. Billie Holiday was systematically destroyed by her husband, the FBI, and society. Louis McKay was just one part, but perhaps the most merciless part, because Billie trusted him, loved him, and Louis used that trust as a weapon every single day. How right Tallulah Bankhead's 1957 letter was. That man is going to kill you and nobody will believe it, because you're already dying slowly. Tallulah had seen everything, but nobody had listened. Billie Holiday's story isn't just the tragedy of a jazz legend, it's the most painful example of how abuse, control, and betrayal can destroy a person. Louis McKay was never punished, never held accountable, but history remembers him as the man who destroyed Billie Holiday. Today when someone asks how did Billie Holiday die, the answer is usually liver cirrhosis. But the real answer should be she was systematically killed by Louis McKay, physically, psychologically, and financially. And the FBI watched, recorded, and did nothing. This should be Billie Holiday's real death certificate, and Louis McKay's real legacy, the man who silenced one of America's greatest voices.